Hi, thank you so much for being with us again on Good News Broadcast. First of all, tell us a little bit about UnHitched. Tell us a little bit about the premise of it.
Okay, well, UnHitched is a book based on 3 different research projects that I did over more than 10 years about family diversity, both in the U.S. and elsewhere. I studied gay men in Los Angeles and the diverse forms in the greater Los Angeles area and the different forms of bonds and families that they were creating and the decisions they were making about becoming parents or not and the different ways they were doing that. Then I traveled to South Africa and I studied family diversity there with an emphasis on polygamy. And I went to South Africa because of the argument that if you legalize same-sex marriage, the next thing you know is you would have to legalize polygamy. And South Africa, I knew, was the one nation in the world where both same-sex marriage and polygamy were legal. So that posed a really interesting place to study. And then I also did research about a really unusual ethnic minority group in southwestern China called the Mosa people, who have had a maternal extended family system for 2 millennia that is not based on marriage at all, and in which parents are brothers and sisters and grandmothers and her brothers and sisters, and the sexual couple don't live together or parent together.
Sure. Now, so from your studies, the traditional nuclear family, do you find that superior, or what did you find?
Yeah, well, what ties all of these projects together is the way in which they show that our idea of the normal family is not normal. It's not been normal in U.S. history or in Western history or around the world, and it certainly isn't normal anymore. In fact, recent data from the Census Bureau shows that we now have more households in the U.S. that don't include married couples than that do. So clearly we're living in a variety of different ways today for many, many different reasons. But the book shows that on some level that has always been true, and that there isn't just one family that automatically is best for everyone or that can work with all economic and social circumstances, and that kids can thrive in a host of different forms of families so long as there's good parenting taking place.
Now, do you find that marriage is a natural and universal institution?
Quite the opposite. Although it's certainly widespread, even defining what we mean by marriage, when people say that marriage is universal, they're usually thinking of marriage as they understand it, which is already a very contemporary and different form of marriage from what we've even had in our society over the centuries. But certainly, like the Mosa people don't have a family system without marriage at all. Mm-hmm. Most of the world's marriage systems prior to the late 19th century, and still many, many today, are polygamous marriage, and that's not usually what most people mean when they talk about marriage in our society. So the point really is that it would be hard to ever say that anything was universal, but that what does seem to be universal clearly are that people have needs to have intimate ties, and certainly children have needs for stable forms of family, but these can take many, many different shapes and forms.
What are some of the benefits that you found with polygamy?
Well, it's not. I certainly don't advocate polygamy. In the book, I don't advocate any one particular form of family, though I do advocate a family value we can come back to, which is integrity. But what I found is that for women in our own society and certainly in South Africa, in some circumstances, polygamous marriage was certainly the lesser of evils or a reasonable choice or even the best possible choice under very difficult circumstances. And I also found, and I can tell you a story that would illustrate that, and I also found that even in the history of the U.S. that there have been periods in which women within polygamous marriages had more power and independence than women in the same period did automatically in a monogamous marriage, so that it's the nature of the relationships much more than the name of the structure that makes a difference. And there certainly are many women today who would rather share a husband than have none. And there are communities in which that makes that almost the only option. And we see some of that reviving the appeal in places like the inner city, where there's a dire shortage of African-American men.
Sure. And how does gay parenting challenge the traditional gender roles in our society?
Well, especially gay male parenting does, but lesbian parenting does as well. I mean, for one thing, the gay men that I studied who are parents, most of them really are amazing parents, and I came to believe that it's likely that gay male parents may wind up turning out to be among the best parents, not because they're gay exactly, but because it is so hard for them to become parents that it kind of winnows out the field to only those who are the most dedicated. So it's a much smaller percentage of gay men than even of lesbians or certainly of heterosexual. There are no accidental children,
right.
And it takes such dedication and such premeditation that they often, they're older, they're more aware of what matters to them in life, and they usually are pretty dedicated as parents. But the other thing that I found and that I think is really important and valuable for everyone is that gay men have found ways of forming families that aren't necessarily based on love and romance. So that's how it ties in with the Mossa people who base their family lives on family bonds, and then they separate out their sex and romantic life. So I found gay men and lesbians who built on a friendship to decide to form a family together around shared parenting that wasn't based on their own romantic attachments. And some of them had 3- and 4-parent families that have now lasted a very long time and have been very successful.
Well, Judith, I have one last question for you, and you've been a great guest today. What is good news for you?
Well, the good news for me is that on the ground, people around the world are dealing with the changes in our life and creating forms of family that are much more adaptive than the very rigid ideology about a normal family that, unfortunately, too many of our politicians recite. But it would be even better news if we could get some of those issues out of the food fight polarized political realm and start addressing the needs of all families and giving respect to people who are trying their best to bring up their kids and take care of each other in the ways that they can.
Right. Judith, thank you so much for being with us today on Good News Broadcast.
Thank you for having me.